What would you do if you heard your name whispered in an empty room? We know that humans need sleep, but we don't fully understand why. Sure, we know sleep helps the body heal and organize memories, but there's still a lot we don't know. To study something, sometimes the best way is to see what happens when it's missing. Sleep is no exception. The longest anyone has stayed awake is 18 days, and by then, most people's brains don't work properly. But they didn't use any kind of drugs or enhancers during that experiment. I got a job offer a few weeks ago for a sleep deprivation study funded by the US government. Was it ethical? Definitely not. But they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, as the saying goes. You see, I have a genetic condition called fatal familial insomnia. It's a prion disease, which means it affects my brain. I haven't shown any signs yet, and most people don't until they're about 50 years old, so I have a few more good years left before my condition sets in. I've dedicated my life to researching cures for prion diseases in hopes of saving myself. So far, no luck. But this job came with access to CRISPR technology, which could help me work on genetic modifications. I couldn't pass that up, even if it couldn't save me in time. Maybe it could help others avoid the same fate as me and my mother. The experiment's main idea was simple. We had 5 subjects who had basically been erased by the government. People with no past, no names, just numbers. Our goal was to study what happens when they're deprived of sleep, using any method possible to keep them awake. This included drugs, rewards, torture, anything to prevent them from falling asleep. It was not ethical, but I was willing to do it in the hope that my work might help people in the future. There were 3 researchers, myself, Philip, and Taryn, plus 1 guard for each subject. We were given a decent lab to work in. We had beds, a full kitchen with a cook for lunch and dinner, and entertainment for when we weren't working. It was nice because we were going to be there for a long time. The subjects, however, didn't have it as good as we did. They shared a common room with separate rooms for bathrooms and showers. The furniture was minimal, hard metal cots without pillows or blankets. The subjects also had access to various forms of entertainment, which was important to keep their minds active and stop them from sleeping. Every room, even the bathrooms, was monitored by 3 cameras, so we could watch them 24/7. There was a one-way glass window in front of the common area where we could observe them without being seen. From this point on, I'll be sharing my daily research notes to give a full picture of how things unfolded. These are the personal notes of Dr. Michael A. Ripley, kept for my own future reference. Day 1. Everything started smoothly. I met my fellow researchers, Philip and Taryn, early in the day, and we decided on how to divide our shifts. Taryn would take the midnight to 8 a.m. shift, I would take 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and Philip would take the night shift until Taryn came back. It was a good system, and we always had at least 2 guards watching with us in case anything went wrong. Taryn's shift passed without any issues. The subjects were all gathered at a table in folding chairs, the only seating they had. Their rooms had metal cots, but no one complained. It seemed like they were used to uncomfortable conditions. I started observing the subjects more closely. Subject 1 was a scrawny man in his mid-20s, pale with dark hair. He looked like someone you'd imagine involved in something terrible. Subject 2 was an older man, maybe in his 50s, balding with a lot of tattoos, some of which were offensive. He didn't look like someone who made good choices in life. Subject 3 was in his 40s, had a kind face, and seemed like someone who would tell dad jokes. I couldn't figure out why he was there. Subject 4 reminded me of Jeffrey Dahmer, cold and emotionless. Just hearing him talk gave me chills. Subject 5 looked wealthy, like a businessman with no empathy. He had the kind of charm that seemed rehearsed, like everything he did was calculated to manipulate others. None of them knew what the experiment was yet. We hadn't started using sleep deprivation methods, but I expected we'd need to push them soon. In the afternoon, Subject 2 said he was going to take a nap, so I used the controls to prevent it. I turned up the lights in his room and played a high-pitched sound through a hidden speaker. The others were still talking in the common room, but nothing important happened for the rest of the day. Day 2. By today, the subjects were starting to get irritated. That was expected since they hadn't slept for over 24 hours. So far, our methods, using lights and sounds, had worked to keep them awake without them realizing what we were doing. However, Subject 4 was starting to show signs of paranoia, talking to himself and looking around nervously. A few times, he stared directly into the camera, which was unsettling. Around noon, Subject 1 started a strange conversation with Subject 3. Here's a transcript. 1. Do you see them? 3. See who? I only see us. 1. The kids. 3. What? 1. They told me what you did. 3. I don't know what you're talking about. 1. Laughing. Sure you do. How many were there? 3. Please leave me alone. 1. You're the reason I'm here. Why should I leave you alone? At this point I called a guard, Murray, just in case things got out of hand. Subject 3 was clearly getting nervous, but 1 left him alone and sat on his cot, staring at the wall for hours with a strange smile on his face. I have no idea what 1 was talking about, but it really shook 3. After that, 3 didn't say a word for the rest of the day, and when he went to his room he couldn't sleep. He complained that everyone was being too loud, even though they were speaking in whispers. This might have been an early sign of sleep deprivation affecting his mind. Subjects 2 and 4 seemed to be getting along, but I'm not sure why. They talked about their past jobs. 2 had been a construction contractor, and 4 had worked with industrial chemicals. It was strange to see them being friendly, considering where we were. Day 3. Today was quieter. The subjects were starting to keep to themselves after 48 hours without sleep. 4 continued to talk to himself, becoming louder and more paranoid. But the most interesting was Subject 5. He didn't seem bothered at all. While the others were clearly tired and stressed, he sat in his corner quietly, sometimes smiling, but mostly just watching everyone. Day 4. Today, the subjects started to realize what was going on. Subject 3 asked 5 when the last time he slept was, and they figured out that none of them had slept since arriving. Subject 1 said he had been awake for 72 hours before even coming here due to his insomnia. The others checked the clock and realized they had been awake for 4 days straight. Subject 2 started getting angry, demanding to be let out and told what was happening. 3 tried to calm him down, saying they were probably being monitored. 4 started searching for cameras but didn't find any. Meanwhile, Subject 1 had retreated to his room, talking to himself about them coming for him. It was clear he was seeing hallucinations. At one point, 1 started screaming at something invisible, begging it to leave him alone, like he was talking to a ghost. Subject 2 yelled at him to shut up, but 1 only got louder, crying in terror at whatever he thought was in the room with him. It was disturbing to watch. Through all this, 5 remained quiet, sitting in his corner and watching everyone. He seemed completely unaffected by everything going on. Day 5. Our initial methods to keep the subjects awake were starting to fail. Subjects 2 and 4 had started nodding off, so we moved to the next phase, putting amphetamines in their food. It worked. The subjects became more alert, but it also made them more agitated. Subject 4 began scratching at his skin, claiming something inside him wanted to get out. We had to send in a guard to stop him from hurting himself further. It was disturbing to see. He was convinced that his soul was trapped and needed to escape. Subject 2, meanwhile, started getting violent, smashing his hand into a wall and demanding to know what was going on. The guards had to step in again to calm him down. By the end of the day, 4 was restrained to keep him from hurting himself. He begged the guards to kill him so his soul could leave his body. The dread in my stomach was growing. Something about this experiment didn't feel right anymore. Day 6. I'm feeling shaken. Subject 1 has now been awake for at least 9 days, and his condition has become a benchmark for what might happen to the others. Things took a turn for the worse today. Around 2 p.m., Subject 1 went to his room and sat on his cot. The others were still isolated. 2 was pacing and shouting. 3 was hiding under his bed, rocking back and forth, and 4 was catatonic, staring at the wall. Meanwhile, 5 continued sitting in his corner, keeping clean and composed, which was more than I could say for the others. Most hadn't showered since arriving, and I'm pretty sure some hadn't cleaned up after using the bathroom. Murray had mentioned earlier that the smell in the room was unbearable. I was reviewing the dosage of amphetamines we had administered, making sure we weren't giving them too much, when something strange happened. I heard my name. At first, I thought it was Murray calling out to me, but when I looked around, he wasn't there. Then I heard it again, this time over the sound feed. Subject 1 was staring directly at the camera, addressing me by name. 1. Why are you doing this, Michael? I froze. How could he know my name? There was no way he knew any of us were here, let alone what my name was. We were hidden behind the one-way glass, and he couldn't have seen or heard us. 1. This won't help you. You can't be cured. I panicked. I hit the button for the guards, and Murray came rushing in, asking if I needed anything. When he saw the state I was in, he became concerned. 1 was still talking. 1. You'll die screaming, but you're lucky. Murray quickly pulled me out of the room and called for Philip to take over. He led me to the medical bay and gave me an anti-anxiety pill to calm me down. Philip took over my shift so I could rest, but I was still shaken. They believed me that 1 had spoken, but they tried to come up with logical explanations. Maybe 1's real name was Michael too, or maybe he was hallucinating someone he knew. I wanted to believe their explanations, but deep down something felt wrong. I'm going to try to sleep now, but I wanted to write these notes while everything was fresh in my mind. The medication is starting to make me drowsy. Day 7. I didn't sleep well last night. When I woke up this morning, I found out that Philip had a similar experience as I did with Subject 1. 1 had spoken to him, calling him by name and laughing quietly. Philip wouldn't tell me what 1 had said, but I could tell it really shook him. We decided to stay with Taryn during her shift this morning, just to see if anything strange would happen again. It didn't take long. Subject 1 was sitting in his bunk, muttering to himself, when he suddenly mentioned Taryn's name. 1. Do you miss it, Taryn? Taryn looked confused and didn't respond. She hadn't experienced anything like Philip and I had, so she didn't know how to react. 1. Do you miss the way he touched you? Taryn's face turned pale. She quickly ran out of the room and barely made it to the hallway before throwing up. 1. He does. He misses it. Laughing. He's right here if you'd like to say hello. Daddy misses you, Taryn. Philip and I were speechless. Jesus Christ, was all Philip could say. I rushed out to check on Taryn. She was having a full-blown panic attack, crouching in the corner of the hallway, sobbing and hyperventilating. Please make him stop, she begged, covering her head with her hands. Inside the room, 1's laughter was getting louder, which only made the other subjects more upset. Subject 2 couldn't take it anymore. He stormed into 1's room, ready to fight. Philip shouted for me to come back as 2 grabbed 1 and slammed his head into the wall. Even though 1's head hit the wall hard, he didn't stop laughing. Murray, the guard, rushed in, trying to stop 2 from killing 1. 2 grabbed 1 again for another hit, but 1 just kept laughing and looked at 2. 1. They found me. They'll find you soon too. You're out of your cell. 2. What the hell are you talking about? 1. How many girls were there? 2. What? 1. I can't count them all. The room is getting crowded. 2. Shut up! Slams 1's head into the wall again. Murray quickly ran in, along with another guard, to pull 2 away. But 1 kept laughing, now counting out loud like the Count from Sesame Street. It would have been funny if his head wasn't partly caved in. Murray dragged 2 back to his room and locked the door, giving him time to cool off. We pulled 1 into the medical bay to check his injuries. By all medical logic, he shouldn't have been alive, much less conscious. But there he was, sitting on the table, still laughing and muttering about all the people coming to check on him. I got chills when he started saying names as he looked around the room. His body was perfectly fine, except for the lack of sleep. In fact, it seemed like he was getting more aware. I thought it was a good time to ask him some questions. Me. 1. What are you seeing right now? 1. The other kids, classmates, friends, bullies. Me. What kids? 1. The kids I buried. I froze. Maybe he was delusional, since he had been awake the longest. His symptoms were more advanced than the others. 1. Oh, hi, Coach. Mitchell. I was checking his pupils when he suddenly started seizing. Blood and organs erupted from his stomach like they were being torn out by invisible hands. Murray. Jesus, what the hell? Mike, did you do that? I stepped back. Blood splattered on my face. One was still laughing as blood gushed from his body. That feels so much better. I rushed forward, trying to stop the bleeding and put his organs back inside. Strangely, he looked peaceful, as if he was relieved. His body wasn't going into shock, and he looked like he'd just woken up from a nice nap. Me, can you still hear me? Oh yes, I can hear you. Sorry about earlier. Me, what exactly happened? They want to keep me here. They're still mad. Me, who's mad? The people I buried. The people I loved. I didn't want anyone else to get them, and now they don't want anyone to get me. Me, get you? What do you mean? The jailer. I had no idea what he meant. He went silent as I stitched up his stomach. His organs were shredded, and I had to remove some to stop them from rotting inside him. He should have been dead, but he was sitting there with a creepy smile on his face. Then, did the unthinkable. He got up and walked toward the door, limping slightly. His skull was still partly crushed, and blood was seeping through his bandages, but he walked out like nothing had happened. As he passed Taryn in the hallway, he stopped and looked at her. I'm sorry about earlier. He was a very angry man, very scary. I can see why it happened. Taryn, what is wrong with you? How the hell did you know that? He was whispering in my ear. Turns to me and Murray. Can someone let me back in? I'd like to apologize to the bad man. We were too stunned to do anything but let him back into the subject room. He walked straight to Two's door and looked at him through the glass. Two stopped pounding on the door when he saw one's bloody face. I feel bad for you. I don't feel bad for many people, but you're about to have a bad time. 2, who the hell are you? What do you know about me? 1, everything. They told me all of it. They said they'll see you soon, so I don't need to do anything. The other subjects backed away, terrified of 1. Even Subject 5, who had been so calm before, looked genuinely scared. 1 went back to his room, sat on his cot and went silent again. Taryn finally composed herself enough to tell us why she had reacted so strongly. When she was a teenager, her father had molested her. One day, she pushed him and he fell in the bathroom, hitting his head on the toilet and dying. She had only told the police and her therapist, so there was no way 1 could have known. Philip and I compared notes. It turned out 1 had something on all of us. He knew about my disease, Taryn's trauma, and Philip's secret. Philip had killed 2 people in a drunk driving accident, but his father's connections had covered it up. Philip took over for the rest of Taryn's shift while I tried to rest, but all I could see when I closed my eyes was 1 being ripped apart from the inside. He was grateful for what happened, like someone had saved him from a greater evil. I couldn't stop thinking about the jailer he kept mentioning. Philip didn't call me for anything during his shift, so I dragged myself out of bed to start mine. I grabbed a cup of coffee and got caught up on what had happened. Things were relatively quiet. 1 was in a catatonic state, awake but completely checked out. 5 was clearly shaken, glancing nervously around the room. 2 was still locked in solitary, while 3 sat in a corner muttering to himself. 4 was obsessively chewing on his fingernails until they started to bleed. Murray had to restrain him and wrap his hands to stop him from doing any more damage. The rest of my shift was quiet. Philip came back to relieve me, and we decided it was best to isolate 1 for now. Day 8. Compared to the past few days, today was almost boring. The subjects seemed to be in and out of delirium, possibly experiencing micro-sleeps to keep their brains functioning. It's not a real substitute for REM sleep, but it seemed to help them survive. 1 was still alive, despite the blood loss. He wasn't eating anymore, and the blood was pooling on his cot. But he didn't seem to care. He even started laughing again. I didn't sleep well last night. The images of 1's insides haunted me. His head was starting to swell, but it didn't seem to affect him beyond the usual symptoms. I spent hours thinking about what the jailer could be. I had Murray escort me to talk to 1 again. Me, who is the jailer you keep talking about? 1, he keeps us here. Every time you go to sleep, he makes sure you don't stay. Me, where is here? 1, awake. Me, so the jailer makes sure you sleep? Why wouldn't you want to stay awake? 1, because they'll find you. He broke down into gibberish after that, talking about how they were going to find me. I didn't get anything useful out of him. So we left. On our way out, two approached us. Two, you have to let me out. Two, you have to let me out of here. They're all around me, telling me they're going to rip my soul apart. Me? Who? Are you talking about the other subjects? Two, the girls. They keep saying they'll rip my soul apart and eat it so they can leave. Murray and I were confused, but I just told him, I'll see what I can do. And we left, locking the door behind us. Both of us let out deep breaths we hadn't realized we were holding. I was disturbed to see 2 and 1 showing similar symptoms. I couldn't tell if it was just sleep deprivation or if they were sharing some kind of delusion. The rest of my shift passed without much incident. The subjects remained in their micro-sleep-like states most of the time. However, we noticed a new problem. One couldn't digest food anymore, and the others were starting to refuse food too. It wasn't like they knew what we were doing to the food. They just stopped eating altogether, maybe out of some instinct or lack of will. I was worried malnutrition would eventually lead them to pass out, so we had to keep a close eye on that. It was time to move to the next phase of sleep deprivation. We were given a neurotoxin by the military that would prevent cognitive shutdown and microsleeps. It was basically a more intense version of amphetamines in gas form. We would pump it into the room as needed, but once it was in, nobody could enter or leave. The system would have to flush out the gas and pump oxygen back in before it was safe to enter. It was a complicated process, but it kept the rest of us safe. Taryn came back for her shift, still shaken but determined not to let it get to her. I admired her strength, but I hoped she was ready. I offered to cover for her if she needed it, but she insisted she was fine. I just hoped she was right. I'm heading to bed now. Hopefully things will stay calm because I'm exhausted. I might take some sleeping pills from the medical bay if I can't sleep on my own. Day 9. For the first time in days, I finally got a good night's sleep. I woke up feeling refreshed, ready to tackle the day. Taryn's shift went smoothly. One muttered something about her father watching over her, but otherwise things were calm. 2 was curled up in his room, shaking and begging, please make them leave, while peeking out from behind his hands like a scared child. Honestly, watching this huge, tattooed man cowering in the corner was darkly funny, given everything else that had happened. Subject 5 was the next to break. His cool, collected demeanor had been slipping ever since 1 and 2's confrontation, but now he started complaining about smelling smoke. 5, doesn't anyone else smell that? There's a fire somewhere and we're just sitting here. Murray checked the facility, but there was no fire, no smoke. 5 kept pacing the room, checking every wall like he was trying to find a way out. Meanwhile, 3 and 4 were glaring at each other from opposite sides of the room. I don't know what started their hostility, but I overheard 4 asking, would they let me sleep if I killed someone for them? I didn't know who they were. Maybe he meant us, or maybe something from his hallucinations. 3 kept complaining about a rotten smell, saying it smelled like decaying bodies. Maybe it was a side effect of the gas, but he was convinced he was smelling real corpses. How he knew what that smelled like, I couldn't tell you. The rest of the day passed without much incident. 1 was still alive, though how, I had no idea. He wasn't eating, and the blood loss should have killed him by now. Still, he sat there, bleeding and laughing occasionally. I'm hoping for another peaceful night of sleep. Philip took over in a good mood, so hopefully the worst of the chaos is behind us. Day 10. I jinxed myself by thinking things were calming down. It's day 10, and everything's falling apart again. The other subjects are now showing the same signs that Subject 1 showed a few days ago. Subject 4 managed to scratch his way out of the bandages we put on his hands, but he's not hurting himself anymore. Subject 5 was sitting in the corner, breathing fast and looking around like he was afraid. He kept complaining about smelling something burning. I didn't sleep well either. My mind kept going back to what my mom went through when her insomnia got really bad. Near the end, she would see things that weren't there, her hallucinations becoming worse. In a way, she was lucky. Her disease only took a few weeks to kill her once she couldn't sleep at all. It was a horrible time, though, just like when I watched my grandfather slowly lose himself to dementia. By the time it was over, she wasn't even my mom anymore. Suddenly 5 started screaming. He said something was grabbing him, and he was thrashing around on the floor. I called for Murray and Philip, thinking he was having a medical emergency. They rushed in. I quickly cycled the gas out of the room to make it safe for us, and we ran inside when the oxygen filled the air again. Then, something crazy happened. 5 just caught on fire. Huge flames erupted from his body like he was a torch. I have no idea how it happened, but my best guess is that when the fresh oxygen hit him, it caused the fire. Still, I couldn't figure out what started the flames in the first place. Murray grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed him until the flames were out. Philip and I carried 5 to the medical bay and started treating his burns. His skin was burned badly, still smoking in places. His screams were the worst part. It sounded like he was being tortured in some fiery hell. Despite the pain he was in, he kept screaming and begging for us to help him. "Philip, we're going to help you. Did you have anything on you? Matches? A lighter? What caused the fire?" 5. "They grabbed me. Their hands. Please get them off me." As we took off the rest of his burned clothes, we saw something strange. Around his wrists and ankles, there were marks, burn marks in the shape of hands, like someone had grabbed him so hard that the burns went all the way to the bone. The burns had sealed the blood vessels shut, so at least there wasn't much bleeding. We bandaged him as best as we could and left him in the medical bay. After seeing what happened to 1 and now 5, we were starting to get scared. We didn't know what was happening, but this was way worse than just sleep deprivation. We were still shaken by what happened when we heard the gas alarm go off. It was time for another round of gas, and the alarm was reminding us to make sure the door was sealed. That's when we realized our mistake. When we carried 5 out of the room, we forgot to take the fire extinguisher with us. We saw it sitting in the room just as the gas started pumping in. 2 noticed it too. He grabbed the fire extinguisher and smashed it into the observation window, breaking it in 3 hits. The glass shattered, and Philip and I froze. We knew right away that we were screwed. The gas was going to come into the observation room, and we had no way to stop it. It would take hold of us fast, and we didn't know how long we had before it would make us go crazy too. 2 crawled through the broken window, cutting his arms on the glass. Blood was pouring from the deep cuts down his forearms as he staggered toward us. Murray pulled out his gun and pointed it at 2, but before he could fire, something invisible yanked the gun out of his hand. It was like whatever was in the room didn't want us to kill 2. A second later, we saw why. Something ripped a huge chunk of flesh from 2's neck. Blood gushed out, soaking his clothes. He screamed in pain, but it wasn't over. His body was thrown backward onto the floor, and then something started pulling him. His arms and legs were stretched out to the sides, like he was tied to an invisible rack. His joints started popping, one by one. Ankles, wrists, elbows, knees, hips, shoulders, all of them being pulled apart. The popping sound was sickening. I'll never forget it. The invisible force was tearing his limbs apart slowly, making him feel every bit of pain. Meanwhile, the other subject stood there, too shocked to move. Then, something worse happened. The gas sensors outside the lab were triggered, and the facility went into lockdown. Steel shutters came down over all the exits, trapping us inside. The emergency lights started flashing red. We watched in horror as 2's arms and legs were torn off, blood spilling everywhere. An announcement came over the intercom. "Alert! Nerve agent has escaped outside of lab confinement. Please remain calm, and help will be with you shortly." That was 5 hours ago. No one has come to help us. I don't think anyone will. We've tried calling the emergency line, but all we get is a recording. "Please remain calm. Help will be with you shortly." If they were going to help, they would have done it by now. I think they planned this. The people who set up this experiment wanted to see what the nerve gas would do to us, and now we're stuck here, trapped with no way out. The gas is terrible. It makes me feel wired, like I've been on drugs for days. My whole body feels like it's buzzing with electricity, and I can't sit still. The worst part? There's no way to shut off the gas from inside the lab. The system is controlled remotely, and it's not going to stop until the whole place is filled with gas. They didn't even give us a way to turn it off ourselves. This was part of the plan all along. Murray and I tried breaking down the door, but it's useless. We hoped the cook would come by for dinner and let us out, but it looks like they were told not to come in today. Looks like I'm going to die from insomnia before my own disease gets me. Great. Day 11. 2 is still alive. His wounds where his arms and legs were torn off have scabbed over, but he's clearly in a lot of pain. One has left his room to watch him, saying the girls are enjoying their revenge. One still talks about the kids around him, but he hasn't shown any new injuries. Maybe the damage to his head is protecting him in some weird way, but I don't know. The rest of us, the non-subjects, though I guess we're all subjects now, have given up on taking shifts or trying to sleep. We're stuck here, and even if I wanted to tell someone where we are so they could save us, I don't know where we are. They picked me up at the Denver airport and drove me to the middle of nowhere. We don't even have a clue where we are. They knew what they were doing when they set this up. Taryn says Philip and I are paranoid for thinking that, but it's the only thing that makes sense. Despite the open window, the subjects haven't tried to escape. Maybe they know it's pointless. Maybe they know we're just as trapped as they are. Maybe this is karma, and now we get to experience the same hell they're going through. I've been awake for 3 days straight now, but honestly, it's not the worst thing I've been through. The worst part is feeling so tired but not being able to sleep. The gas makes sure of that, buzzing through my body, keeping me wired. The gas doesn't seem to be going in intervals anymore. I think it's constantly pumping into the facility now. There's no place to hide from it. We had our first deaths today. 2 of the guards were found dead in their room, each with a bullet hole in their heads. They must have shot each other in some kind of suicide pact. I'm honestly jealous. I wish I had the guts to end it like they did. But something's keeping me hanging on, maybe some sick curiosity to see how this ends. I think this has turned from research notes into a journal. It probably sounds like the ramblings of a crazy person, but we know what we're seeing is real. No one will believe us, but maybe that's why they haven't cut off our internet access yet. Day 12. I'm beginning to wonder if there's any point in keeping track of the days. The only way I know it's day 12 is by checking the clocks in my computer, but who knows if they're even right anymore. I haven't seen the sun since the shutters came down, and I doubt I'll ever see it again. I wish I'd enjoyed my time outside more. The subjects are still alive. I don't know if they've reached some kind of strange healing ability, but we took a blood sample from 2. He's still alive, but it's like something is torturing him. The invisible force that tore him apart keeps poking at his healing skin, making it bleed again. All he can do is scream in pain. Subject 1 isn't in a daze anymore. He's more awake than he's been in days, and he started talking to us. He wasn't talking to anyone in particular, just asking open-ended questions. 1. So what are you in here for? What did you do? Want to know what I did? 2. Shut up, stop singing. 1. Oh, that's not me. 4. Please let me go. Please just let me out of here. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Subject 3 was huddled in a corner, muttering to himself about teaching someone a lesson. I soon realized what he meant when he started talking about his past. 3. I needed to teach her a lesson. She was getting too bold, and I had to show the kids what happens when you act like that. A woman is supposed to obey her husband, and if she doesn't, I have the right to punish her. What's wrong with that? 1. Ooh, I see her beside you. She brought the kids too. Did you teach them a lesson too? 3. I kept them pure. They died pure. Taryn looked like she was going to throw up. I motioned for her to leave, but she refused. She was strong, stronger than I'd ever seen. 1. Damn, dude. At least I just shot up a school because they bullied me. Well, there it was. 1 was a school shooter, and 3 was a man who killed his family. Any sympathy I had for them was gone now, especially when 1 started talking about his shooting spree. 1. It was easy to shoot up a school. Have they changed that yet? It's been years since I was locked up. Back in my day, you could walk in with a gun, no problem. I can see Erica standing there, but not much of her face is left. Oh, I get it now. They look how they died. That's why your family looks so wet, right? 3. I drowned them. 1. Did you drown them in the bathtub or a river? Come on, tell me. 3. I tied cinder blocks to their feet and threw them in the pool. 1. Whistles. Wow, that's brutal. Nice job. How about you, Jeffrey Jr.? What did you do? 4. None of your business. 1. The people around you say otherwise. A lot of hospital gowns. What did you do? Work with sick people? 4. I was trying to help. 1. Help the Grim Reaper. 2. Shut up! 1. Calm down, boss. I already know what you did. I can't even count how many girls I see around you. 2. Shut up. 1. Yeah, you don't need to explain. I'm starting to look like an angel next to you guys. 4. Please shut up. 1. I wonder what 5 did. There were a lot of burnt body parts around him. Maybe he was an arsonist, or maybe he committed some war crimes. Those bodies were crispy. 1 was enjoying this, even though he was missing half of his organs. He was telling everyone's darkest secrets like a twisted storyteller. Then he looked at us, Philip and me, and I felt cold terror. 1. You 2. You have people following you too. You didn't do it on purpose, did you? Look at the guy with half his head. We should be friends. 1 pointed at the side of his head where his skull was crushed. Philip went silent. I knew he was thinking about the 2 people he killed in the car crash. 1. Well, you'll see them soon. And you, who's the woman? A chill ran through me. I knew who it was, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. 1. Killing an old lady, huh? That's harsh. Murray, you're the only one who doesn't have anyone following you. Good job. He gave Murray a thumbs up and laughed. 2 screamed for him to stop, but 1 just laughed louder. We left the room after that and sat in silence for a long time. I'm sorry, Philip whispered. He kept saying it over and over, and eventually he broke down crying. I wandered off to read something, hoping it would calm my mind. I was still trying to think of a scientific explanation for all of this, but nothing made sense. Maybe the supernatural was real after all. Day 13. I've been irritable before, but this was worse. Every little sound was like a hammer pounding on my skull. The headache I've had for days was getting worse. Philip had retreated to his bed, barely moving. He was crying on and off, but mostly he just stared at the wall, completely out of it. We tried offering food to the subjects, but none of them wanted to eat anymore. They were all seeing people from their pasts, ghosts haunting them. I'm starting to lose focus myself. It feels like I'm sleepwalking. My brain isn't working right, so forgive me if I make mistakes in these notes. I'll try to keep writing, but I don't know how long I can keep this up. Day 14. Something strange happened today. 5, who had been lying in the medical bay since he caught fire, got up on his own. His skin was peeling off, and he was still bleeding, but he walked over to the window and started banging on it. His bloody fists left smears on the glass. It was like he was drumming on the window at a funeral. We took more blood samples, and I've discovered something horrifying. The cells in the subjects' bodies won't die. It's like they're stuck in some kind of frozen state, unable to regenerate but unable to die either. I think it's because they're not getting any REM sleep. Their bodies are in a kind of suspended animation, keeping them alive while they feel everything. 2 is still being tortured by whatever's in the room with him. I'm afraid I'll start seeing the same thing soon. 3 started choking today, spitting up water as if he were drowning. It just kept coming out of him, water and blood. 4 was terrified, backing away from the water like it was poison. He started choking himself, his throat muscles contracting so hard they were visible through his skin. I had to stop watching. I couldn't take the sound of 1 laughing while the others suffered. Every so often, 1 would jerk as if something had shot him, and new wounds would open up on his body. I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll find something that can help with my disease, but I'm starting to lose hope. I think we're all trapped in this nightmare. Day 15. I've started hearing voices. A lot of voices, all talking at once. Sometimes I can pick out 1 or 2, but mostly it's just noise. I think this is what the subjects have been dealing with for days. It's terrifying. The worst sound is the singing. It's like a song from hell, sung by little girls. They're mocking us, threatening us with sweet voices. I hear gunshots too, and people screaming for help. I know I'm losing my mind, but I don't know how much longer I can hold on. 2 has stopped screaming, but the girls are still singing to him. I don't know what's coming next, but I'm scared. Taryn came to check on me today. We watched as water flooded the floor near 3, his body convulsing as he drowned in his own blood. 4 was cowering in the corner, choking on his own spit. His brain was swelling, and he looked like he had rabies. "Do you think there's a point of no return?" Taryn asked. She startled me out of my daze. "If we kill ourselves now, maybe we won't suffer." "How do we know we're not already too far gone?" I replied. "I've been awake longer than all of you. I'm hearing things. and I know I'll start seeing things soon. It's going to be bad. One way to find out, she said. She picked up a shard of glass from the broken window and cut her arm. Deep blood poured from the wound, but she stayed conscious. She looked at me, tears in her eyes. If she's already at that point, then I know I'm past it too. We're going to be awake for every horrible moment of this hell. We parted for the time, both going to ponder what was in store for us, or try to think of a way out of this damned place. I doubt we have anything that can break the windows in, but we'll see what we can do. Maybe we can get some clean air coming in here some way. At this point, I'm ready to try anything. Day 16. Honestly, I don't even know if it's really day 16. Everything has started blending together. I think I've been awake for 8 days without any sleep at all. The electric feeling running up my spine is the only thing keeping me moving. I can't stay still and I can't sleep. The sounds I'm hearing, the hallucinations, have gotten much worse. Now I can clearly hear all the terrifying noises coming from the subject's room. Even worse, I've started to smell things, and they're mixing with the foul stench of old blood and waste from the observation room. I've tried everything I can think of to end this. I've tried killing myself a few times, but nothing has worked. I tried hanging myself, but all I got was a bruised neck and difficulty breathing. I already knew from Taryn's experience that blood loss wouldn't work, so that wasn't an option. I even tried drowning myself in the bathtub, but it didn't work either. Just like hanging, I couldn't suffocate, and it was a horrible feeling. My last attempt was by using an air fryer from the kitchen. I figured it would work better than a toaster. I filled the tub with water, plugged in the air fryer, turned it on, and waited. Now, I can smell burning. It's probably my insides cooking. Everything hurts. I don't know how much longer I'll last, but if I survive this, I'm not sure I'll be able to keep going. I'm going to look for other ways out. If it comes down to it, we have some drugs in the medical bay, but honestly, I'm not hopeful anymore. Day 17, maybe. I've started seeing things now. Whatever horrors the others have been talking about, I'm finally seeing them too. But they aren't clear yet. It's like looking through a frosted window. I can see their shapes, but everything is blurry or jumbled. Colors don't match up and the figures are distorted. I'm scared of what I'll see once everything comes into focus, because what I'm already seeing is terrifying. The shapes around one are horrifying. Many of them don't have heads, just large red prism-like shapes where heads should be. The ones around two wear bright pink, and I can always hear the singing. It never stops. There's water dripping from the floor, which I can now see comes from the figures near 3. Their screams are the worst. It sounds like people drowning, screaming underwater with bubbles rising as their lungs fill. I can't imagine the terror they must have felt when they died. 5 is still banging on the door, trying to get out. Whatever is around him doesn't look like people. Some are shaped like humans, but most are just mounds, burning piles of something awful. Molten embers glow among the black and grey. Philip is basically catatonic now. He's shutting down from the stress. I think he's hearing what I hear, the same screams and terrible noises. There's a smell of burning flesh coming from his direction, and I can see why. Whatever is around him is on fire. 4 has gone wild. We had to lock him in his room. He's acting like an animal, howling and sweating, tearing at his own skin like he's trying to claw something out of himself. I don't know if he's suffering from psychosis, rabies, or something else, but we aren't letting him out. I know there's someone behind me too. I know who they are, and I know why they're here. I just can't bring myself to look at them. Murray checks in on me sometimes. I think he's hearing things too, but he hasn't fully realized what's happening yet. The other guard tried to end it, shooting himself with every bullet he had. Now, he's still sitting in the security room, an empty gun clicking against what's left of his jaw. His head is mostly gone, and one of his eyes dangles from the socket, but he keeps trying to talk. Or maybe he's crying. His voice is just a gurgling sound through his torn throat. There's one constant figure, though. It's different from the others. It's made of beams of light, constantly shifting and changing colors. It looks kind, even welcoming. I keep trying to get closer to it, but no matter how hard I try, I can't reach it. It's like an invisible force is pulling me away. The more I walk toward it, the farther away it seems. I think this figure might hold the key to ending all of this. Day 18. The figures are getting clearer now. My God, they're worse than any nightmare I could imagine. They're still not perfectly clear, but now it's like I'm watching an old, grainy video. Their shapes are more defined, but they still look strange and broken. The girls around too are disturbing. They look like patched-together corpses with stitches running along their necks. Some of them are missing eyes, and their faces are painted like creepy dolls. Their pink dresses are stained with blood. They keep dancing and sometimes stop to hit or kick too. One of the girls stomped on his face with a high heel, and I can see his eyes stuck on the heel. 4, and the things around him are attacking each other now. He lunged at one of them, and then they all started tearing each other apart. They're like animals, biting and ripping at his flesh, blood spraying everywhere. One, despite having bullet holes all over his body and a smashed skull, is still in good spirits. At some point, part of his head blew open, spraying brain matter all over the wall, but he just laughed it off, congratulating one of his ghosts for their good aim. The thing that shot him didn't have a head either, just a lower jaw and a flapping tongue. Taryn is barely holding on. She's almost catatonic now too. There's an old man standing near her, glaring at her with a twisted, angry face. He doesn't do anything but stare. I've blacked out a few times and found myself in different places without knowing how I got there. I don't know what's happening during these blackouts, but I'm losing time. Philip is screaming now, holding his head and crying out for help. He keeps apologizing over and over, but he's shouting as if he's trying to be heard over something loud. The figures around him are on fire, just pillars of flame. He's been complaining about the heat, and now I see why. I can see my own demon now too. It's my mother, just as she was when she died. She looks peaceful now, but I remember her screaming in terror and agony as her mind was eaten away by the disease. It wasn't peaceful at all. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry I brought myself to this. I just wanted to help people like us. I'm so sorry. Day. I've lost track of time. I don't know where I've been. I must have blacked out for a long time. It should be day 25, but I'm missing an entire week. Everything is falling apart. Taryn has locked herself in the kitchen, holding a knife, threatening anything that gets too close. She keeps saying there's a pounding in her head, right at the base of her skull. The old man is still standing across from her, just staring. His head is twisted at a strange angle, with bone sticking out from his broken neck. Everything is so clear now, like switching from an old TV to 4K. The sights, the sounds, the smells, they're all overwhelming, and I can't escape them. Philip is nothing more than a charred corpse now. He's lying on the floor, barely breathing. The pillars of flame are still standing beside him, watching as he struggles to survive. 5 is in the main room, surrounded by burning piles of body parts. The smell of gunpowder fills the air. The hands in the piles keep grabbing at him, pulling him deeper into whatever hell awaits us. He's not even fighting back anymore. He just keeps saying they deserve it, every one of them. That constant figure is still there, just out of reach. It's made of light, glowing like stars and galaxies. It looks sad, like it wants to help, but no matter how close I get, I can never touch it. It's like I'm trapped in an infinite loop, always moving toward it, but never able to reach it. I'm going to try and come up with a plan to escape. Maybe I can get Taryn and Murray out of here with me. But the others, they're already lost. They can stay in this nightmare. Day 30, I think. I'm not sure if it's been days, hours, or minutes anymore. Time feels like it's slipping through my fingers. My body keeps going in and out of control. Sometimes I feel like I'm awake, but everything around me seems like a dream. I'm constantly stuck between being awake and being asleep, but I never reach either fully. Everything around me feels so real, and the terrifying things lurking around the subjects are now noticing me. They know I'm watching, and I'm worried they might turn their attention to me soon. I think we've reached 30 days now. While I was lying there, paralyzed at one point, my mind drifted back to a memory I had forgotten for a while. I remembered my mom, her thin, scared face with wide, sleepless eyes, just like mine now. I remembered our last moments together. Her symptoms started slowly at first. She had trouble sleeping here and there, but it wasn't too bad. Over the next few weeks, it got worse. Soon, she was only sleeping for a few hours a week, even with the strongest sleeping pills the doctor could give her. Then, the hallucinations started. She told me she could see my dad, that he was yelling at her, blaming her for things that weren't her fault. My dad was always like that, angry and drunk most of the time. He would sit in front of the TV until he got mad enough to take out his frustration on us. When he died, I was 13, and my mum seemed so relieved. She healed from the bruises, and for a little while, we were happy. But that only lasted 4 more years. The hallucinations got worse, and she became paranoid. She was convinced there were shadows watching her from every corner, waiting for her to fall asleep so they could take her body. She made me install the brightest lights in every room to keep the shadows away. Of course I did it. What else could I do? She didn't even recognize me as her son half the time anymore. She thought I was a stranger, or her older brother sometimes. Then one night she was suddenly herself again. We were watching Jeopardy, together, like we used to do. She loved Alex Trebek, and we never missed an episode. It was a game for us, seeing who could answer more questions correctly. I was surprised when she started talking to me like her old self, instead of the confused, terrified woman she had been for months. "Mikey, I want you to end this," she said suddenly. Her voice was steady, and she looked at me with clear, knowing eyes. It had been so long since she looked at me like that. "Mama, what are you talking about? I'm taking care of you," I replied, but I could tell from her face that she was serious. She knew exactly what was happening. "I want you to let me go. I can't take it anymore. You shouldn't have to go through this either." She had tears in her eyes as she spoke. "Make it quick for me, please, before the shadows take me." I didn't know what to say. I just cried and nodded, telling her I would help her. It broke my heart. After all the weeks of terror and screaming, she was finally herself again, just to ask me to end it. But I couldn't do it. Days passed and I wrestled with the thought, how could I do that to her? She was my mother, the one who had protected me from my father's rage all those years. I couldn't repay her by killing her. Yet, I couldn't stop hearing her words. "I've got you, Mikey. I'll always protect you, even when you think I can't." One night, after she took some sleeping pills, she fell into a restless nap. That's when I did it. I took one of the pillows from the couch, the old, heavy one she loved, and I placed it over her face. I pressed down hard, turning my head away, tears burning in my eyes. She struggled for a moment, her body fighting for life. I pressed harder, crying along with her muffled screams. Finally, she stopped moving. Slowly, her struggles became weaker until she was still. She was finally at peace. I told the doctors I found her like that, and they didn't question it. Given her condition, they didn't bother with an autopsy. I've carried this secret with me ever since, planning to keep it until the day I die. But now, I'm starting to hear her muffled screams again. I hear the same sounds she made in her final moments. And now, I see her. She stands there, watching me. I've tried ignoring her as I check on the others. By now, the only ones who should still be alive are me, Taryn, and Murray. The others, Philip, the subjects, they should be dead, but somehow they're still alive. One is wandering the facility, making finger guns at the shadows, causing blood and body parts to fly from them, but he's taking hits too, like he's being shot by invisible forces. His body is torn up, with bones sticking out of his skin, and he limps down the hallways. The smells in this place are overwhelming. The subject quarters stink of death and waste, while our quarters smell like burning flesh. I'm constantly worried that there's a gas leak and that we'll all go up in flames. Taryn and I have been having more moments of clarity. Even though we both drift in and out of reality, we've managed to talk and piece some things together. Looking back, there were red flags from the start. First, neither of us had a say in picking the subjects. I doubt Philip did either. We noticed that one had already been sleep-deprived before the experiment even started, and there were similarities among the other subjects too. It didn't make sense from a scientific standpoint. Then it hit us. We're all subjects in this experiment. The 5 prisoners were just the warm-up. We were the real test. We watched them fall apart, and now we're living through it ourselves. But the big question is, why? Why are we here? What's the point of all this? That's where Murray came in with a theory. He used to work in intelligence and private security. Based on what he's seen, he thinks this is all about the gas. A new kind of weapon designed to turn soldiers against each other through paranoia and fear. It makes sense. We came here thinking we were doing good, trying to find a cure for sleeplessness and prion diseases. But instead, we've become part of some twisted weapon experiment. Then there are the phantoms, the things haunting the subjects. We can all see them now. The students, the stitched-up girls, the drowned family. And the worst of all, the limbs piled around 5. Murray said he's seen things like that in war zones after bombings. The smell of burning flesh here is different from what's in Philip's room, and it's starting to feel like these phantoms are noticing us too. So far, Taryn and I each have only one phantom following us. They haven't tried to hurt us yet, but I'm worried they will. The things torturing the subjects might turn on us soon. If they do, I'd rather die than go through what the others have. And then, there's the figure we all see, the one made of stars and galaxies. Even Murray sees it. It's always there, just on the edge of our vision. No matter how hard we try, we can't get closer to it. It feels like it's trying to help us, but it's too far away. We talked to one about it, and he called it the jailer. "You see it, don't you?" he said. "That's the one keeping us here. It makes sure we don't escape." I'm not sure I believe him. The figure doesn't seem like it's keeping us trapped. If anything, it feels like it's trying to help, but it's slipping away just out of reach. We've come up with a plan. There's a surgical saw in the medical bay. We're going to try cutting through the vents and see if we can escape. It's a long shot, but it's better than staying here waiting to be torn apart like the others. Before we can leave, though, I know I have to face my mother. I don't want to, but I don't think I can escape this place without confronting her. Day unknown. 3 is starting to fill the subject room with water. I have no idea how it's happening, but the only thing keeping the water in is the closed door. One keeps coming in and out through the window, even though every time he does, he scrapes his skin and bone on the broken glass. The water is almost ankle deep now, and it's even filling the side rooms. I don't know where all this water is coming from, but it seems endless, as if it's being coughed out from 3's lungs without stopping. Soon the water will cover 2, probably drowning him where he lies. Not that he deserves to be saved. The little girls dancing around him have become clearer now, and it's obvious that they suffered more than just being dismembered. 4 is still locked in his room, showing the final stages of rabies. He's shaking and terrified, even as the water creeps in under his door. He's so thirsty, but just looking at the water makes his throat spasm. His mind is convinced it's poison. We've started trying to escape, though it's taking time. The surgical saw we have isn't strong enough for the steel in the vents. It's really meant for cutting through bone, but we're trying. Slowly we made some progress, and eventually we were able to pry the vent open with a cane. Murray went in first with a flashlight, looking for a way out. Taryn and I waited, anxious for any sign that he'd found a way. That's when I slipped into a dreamlike state again. I couldn't stop it. Sleep deprivation was pulling me under, leaving me stuck between sleep and waking. That's when I heard her voice. "Mikey?" It was the first time she'd spoken to me, instead of just staring blankly like she used to. I shut my eyes tight, expecting some kind of punishment for what I had done. After all, I was no better than the people we'd done this to. I was just as guilty. I put these humans through hell, pretending it was for the greater good, but really it was to save myself. I braced myself for the worst. I was ready for something to smother me, to start a slow, painful death that wouldn't end. I deserved it. This was all my fault. I didn't help her out of mercy. I did it to avoid taking care of her, to avoid seeing her decline, counting the days until it would be my turn. I did it to save me, not her. "I've got you, Mikey," I heard her say, her hand touching my face. Slowly I opened my eyes. I was terrified that the peace I felt would be taken away any second. But there she was, smiling warmly. Her face still showed the signs of all the years of abuse, but she looked kind and gentle. I couldn't stop crying. I hugged her tightly, sobbing, begging for her forgiveness. I told her I was sorry over and over. I never meant to hurt her. I just wanted to save her from the suffering. "I've got you," she said again, gently pushing me toward the vent. "Go." Suddenly I felt Taryn pulling me by the arm, dragging me back to the vent. Murray was shouting, telling us to hurry up. The noise must have caught one's attention because he came marching toward us, water splashing around his feet. He had opened the sealed door, letting the water flood the facility faster. It was like Three's slow coughs had turned into a full-on water hose. I could hear his gurgling, drowning screams even though I couldn't see him. The ghosts were closing in as one led them toward us, his broken body wobbling as he walked. He looked like a puppet, with his limbs barely holding together. One of his legs was already broken, dragging a bloody stump through the water. "The doors are open. You've been away too long." One giggled, pointing at me with his twisted hand. I was still crawling into the vent, desperate to escape. "The jailer's given up. You're free. Free to be you. Free to be me. Free to have fun with your new friends. They can't wait to meet you." Taryn kept pulling me, and I could hear Murray shouting from the vent. Finally, I got in all the way and started crawling through. My mom stayed behind, smiling at me as the ghosts swarmed around her. Even in the vent, they followed. I made the mistake of looking back and saw the burned and dismembered arms of Five's victims crawling after us. I crawled faster, my heart racing. I knew they couldn't kill me. I knew that if they caught me, I'd face endless terror. I had passed the point of no return. We reached the end of the vent. I could see a bit of light shining through. Murray was already there, having broken the outer part of the vent. Sunlight streamed in, a promise of some kind of freedom. The feeling of electricity still buzzed up my spine, though I didn't know if it was the gas or just my adrenaline. When we tumbled out of the vent, Taryn and I hit solid ground, grass under our hands. It was one of the best feelings I'd ever had, even though the sunlight made my head pound, but the phantoms were still coming after us. We had no choice but to run, all of us stumbling through the trees, trying to escape. Eventually, we reached a roadside, but instead of finding safety, black vans pulled up. Men jumped out, aiming guns at us, throwing thick cloth bags over our heads and dragging us into the vans. I don't know how long we drove. It felt like hours, but time means nothing to me anymore. When they finally took us out, they still didn't remove the bags. I could tell we were indoors by the sound and the blast of cold air from the AC. Eventually, they tossed us into a room. Taryn was with me, but Murray was gone. The room was simple. There was a one-way mirror on one wall, a small bathroom with a shower, 2 cots, and a desk in the middle with 3 chairs. Taryn and I had no idea what was happening or what we were supposed to do. The door opened, and we were shocked to see who walked in. It was Murray, smiling at us. "Sorry for the rough welcome," he said, sitting down at the table and motioning for us to join him. "I had to make sure you didn't know where we were. But don't worry, you're safe now." "Why are we here, Murray? What's going on?" I asked, glancing around, wondering if there were any ghosts following us. "You two are safe," he repeated. "I told them you could still be useful, so I got you out." "You went through the same hell we did," Taryn shouted, banging the table. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from tears and sleeplessness. "Why?" "Oh, I wasn't suffering like you guys," he replied casually. "I got a solid 8 hours most nights. You never would have found me." It hit me like a ton of bricks. Murray didn't have any ghosts following him. He was gone for long stretches of time during the experiment. And then it all made sense. The fire extinguisher left in the room, the things he knew. "You had an antidote," I said quietly, staring him down. "Of course, I wasn't going in there without one," he laughed. "I was just observing." "You son of a—" Taryn started screaming, lunging across the table, but 2 guards rushed in, guns drawn. Even though we knew we couldn't die, Taryn backed off. "Look, I'm not going to explain everything. I helped you get out, didn't I? Now we're going to detox you from the gas, see how you do. What happened back there? That's not for you to know." Murray got up to leave, motioning for the guards to follow him. "There's a computer here if you want to catch up with the outside world. Not like anyone will believe you." He left us alone. Taryn slammed her fists against the table, raging in frustration. Now I'm sitting here, unsure of what to do next. I thought I wouldn't make it out of that place, but here I am. Too bad nobody will believe what happened to us. Day 54. Yeah, I'm as shocked as you are. We were in that place for nearly 2 months. Looking back, the real violence started around day 10. I don't know how we survived. Taryn and I haven't slept yet. even though we've been here for about 12 hours now. They've brought us food, but I'm not hungry. I haven't eaten in weeks, come to think of it. I'm paranoid they'll do the same thing they did before, dose the food with something to keep us awake. Now that we're somewhere quiet, without the screams and the smell of death, it feels like we can think a little clearer. We've talked about everything that happened, trying to make sense of it. We think sleep is the barrier between life and death. Maybe that's why, when you stop sleeping for too long, these lost souls start to push through. We don't know if we're right, but it's all we can guess after everything we saw. The gas is still messing with our minds, and Murray hasn't spoken to us again. Now that we're somewhere quiet, without the screams and the smell of death, it feels like we can think a little clearer. We've talked about everything that happened, trying to make sense of it. We think sleep is the barrier between life and death. Maybe that's why, when you stop sleeping for too long, these lost souls start to push through. We don't know if we're right, but it's all we can guess after everything we saw. The gas is still messing with our minds, and Murray hasn't spoken to us again. I honestly don't think he will. I doubt they'll ever let us leave this place and see the sun again. The room feels empty compared to the crowds of ghosts and phantoms we were surrounded by for nearly 2 months. If it weren't for Taryn, I'd feel like the last person on Earth, locked away and forgotten. Day 56. The dreamlike states are getting worse. I keep slipping in and out, and it's hard to tell what's real anymore. Even when I'm awake, it feels like I'm only half here. Taryn says she's seen the jailer again, the dark figure made of stars and galaxies. It hasn't shown itself to me yet, but she says it's coming closer. It's still far away, but she swears it's moving toward her. I'm starting to lose hope. If something doesn't change soon, I'm not sure how much longer I can hold on. Day 62. Taryn finally fell asleep. I thought she had died at first. I checked her pulse and it was strong. When I pulled her eyelid open, she was deep in REM sleep. She slept for almost 20 hours straight. When she woke up, she said everything looked brighter, clearer, like the world had sharpened into focus. She hasn't seen any of the phantoms or the jailer since then. Meanwhile, I haven't slept at all. The jailer hasn't come back for me. The buzzing in my spine is still there, and I'm scared it means I'll never sleep again. Day 70. Taryn's been sleeping regularly for the past week. Each time she wakes up, she says she feels more and more normal, like she's finally free. But me, nothing's changed. The jailer hasn't come for me, and the buzzing in my spine hasn't faded. I'm starting to think I'm not going to make it. The others? Maybe they escaped. Maybe the jailer let them go. But me, I don't think I'm going to get out of this. Day 80. They let Taryn go. I don't know where she went. Maybe she's back to her life. Maybe she really escaped. But I'm still here. The phantoms are starting to come back. I can see them lurking in the corners of the room, watching me. I can hear them whispering, calling for me. The jailer still hasn't shown up. I'm terrified that I'm beyond saving now. I think I've gone too far. Day 85. The phantoms are getting closer. They're angry, their eyes full of hatred. Some of them don't even have eyes. They just stare with empty sockets. I can hear their curses, their screams. And one, his laughter is ringing in my ears. It never stops. But there's something else. The jailer. It's back. I can feel it now. It's still far, but it's closer than it's ever been. The stars in its body are pulsing, and I feel like it's reaching out for me. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm ready to find out. Day unknown. She's back. My mum. She's here, and the phantoms have all disappeared. They looked furious when she showed up, like they'd been cut off from their fun. But she's smiling at me, the same smile she used to give when she told me everything would be okay. She walked over to the jailer, took its hand. She's reaching out to me now, smiling. I think this is it. I'm going to take her hand. Goodbye.